Hello, I'm Peter Towers, founder and managing director of ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome to this ESS BIZTOOLS Accountants Minute podcast. We're going to review the comments that we made in Accountants Minute, edition 404, which was titled New to Advisory Services. We've got you covered. I really hope we have. Thanks for joining us for this podcast. As always, if you have any questions, can you please send them through to me, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I will get a reply back to you. And we can hopefully use some of your questions and my comments in a future edition of our podcast summaries of Accountants Minute. There's no doubt that SMEs are experiencing problems in the marketplace. The figures are all around us. It's important that SMEs' service delivery is improved, is increased, because SMEs are suffering. And so are many accounting and bookkeeping firms, because we're all faced with the high interest rates, the high inflation, and the high failure rates are affecting SMEs. A declining influence on the Australian business environment by SMEs has been evidenced by the Australian Small Business and Family Business Ombudsman's report recently. New figures from the tax office reveal that 46% of small business operators do not make a profit. And some 3/4 of self-employed business owners for whom there is a full-time livelihood endeavour are earning less than the average total weekly full-time wage. That's not a very good statistical picture, is it? And there are about 2 million SMEs, according to the Australian government. So the sluggish economic growth combined with the cost of doing business, the pressures that are being felt all around, persistently poor productivity, tight labour markets, are having a detrimental effect on SME operators. And many of them, in fact, most of them, are not receiving realistic business advice throughout the year. They might receive it 1 or 2 weeks of the year when they're talking to their accountant, but they're needing that advice throughout the year. Perhaps not every week, but a lot more frequently than only a couple of times in a year. The operations of a small business are challenging at the best of times. And whilst there are new technology and communications available, and we're using one today, aren't we? SMEs are not fully familiar with all of these new enhancements, because what they're looking for, sometimes they don't fully realise what they need. They really need the services of a full-time accountant, but they're not big enough. They haven't got enough money to justify the employment of a full-time accountant. Because a full-time accountant in a larger organisation plays a very important what-if role for the leadership team. And by what if, I mean that the CEO thinks of an idea, or the marketing manager thinks of an idea and wants to know what it's going to cost and what the economic benefits might be. They need a business case prepared. The person they turn to with the what ifs is the accountant or the chief financial officer. The vast majority of SMEs do not have that person unless they happen to have a family relative or a good mate who does it for them. But that is a real vacuum that accountants and bookkeepers can fill. to supply that service to SME clients because they badly need it if they are going to survive the challenges that are affecting them. But also there's significant challenges for accounting and bookkeeping firms, isn't there? The significant challenges have been well documented in recent months by ESS BIZTOOLS and other people. We had the comments made by the now retired Taxation Commissioner, Chris Jordan, when he indicated that if your business model is high volume, low margin, focused on simple tax returns, it will not be viable in 3 to 5 years' time. And he made that comment in 2.5 years ago. So that means on his original estimates, there are 6 months to 30 months before the full force of the changes that he was announcing that the Taxation Office were introducing, which would reduce SMEs' needs to receive accounting advice because information would be automatically forwarded through to the ATO. But Chris Jordan also added, accountants should diversify their offerings and focus on becoming brilliant and trusted advisors. So his comments were not just directed at the very small end of the accounting market, people who were giving advice on taxation return lodges, self-employed people, people working for wages and salaries in preparing their tax returns. He was also talking about the wider professional services being supplied to SMEs, because I think he is well informed that many of those SMEs require greater accounting input. And then a few weeks ago, I reported to you a comment that had been made in an AI series of webinars over 2 days, where Mark Wickersham, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, a former Sydney firm principal of an accounting firm, and now the principal of London-based Value Pricing Academy and senior consultant for ChatGPT, indicated in his presentation in the AI extravaganza of looking at opportunities for accountants using AI. Compliance work as we know it today will disappear before the end of this decade, or perhaps even earlier. They were his comments. So the longest projection he had going forward of the current work on compliance nature will have disappeared within 5 years. But then he added, or perhaps even earlier. So what's that going to mean to your accountancy business or your bookkeeping business? And then there's another problem, isn't there? Because every time I receive phone calls from accountants anywhere around Australia, I get asked either directly or indirectly, do I know where that firm can find some staff from? So we have a talent attraction and talent retention crisis occurring in Australia by accounting firms. I believe that the introduction of a range of advisory services that we definitely are advocating within ESS BIZTOOLS will make a significant contribution to your ability to, first of all, attract talent and then to retain it. Why? Because they will be undertaking interesting and challenging work on a wide range of activities. SMEs get involved in a wide range of business matters. Now, because the concentration's been on the annual set of accounts and a tax return, I don't know if that's fully appreciated. But SMEs could get involved in wanting to raise capital these days. Crowdsource funding, equity raising. About $440 million has been raised in Australia in the last 7 years from those companies. But I think it's only scratching the surface for what could be done if we mobilised our resources as accountants and made sure we communicated to the SME market the benefits that they can obtain by not having to borrow money, by raising capital. Now, sure, they won't own 100% of the business, but if you look at the big end of town, no one owns 100% of the business, but some people make a lot of money out of it. I think they can develop their businesses because they will have the one extra item that a lot of SMEs haven't got. They've got great ideas. They've got good team members, but they run out of cash, especially if they are innovative and they're undertaking research and development activities. I don't understand why accountants have not really embraced the crowdsource funding opportunities, because to be successful in raising capital of any type, whether it's crowdsource funding, early stage innovation company, or Section 708, or going and talking to the venture capital market, they will need a business plan, a vision document, predictive financial reports. That's the budgets, the cash flows, the projected balance sheets, evaluation of the business, an understanding of what the process they've elected to be involved in entails, whether it's crowdsource funding, equity raising, or the others. And a leadership team and a board of directors who are committed to utilising the funds in a proper business manner and growing the business, because that's what the investors want. They want to supply the cash to help the business grow. And sure, they may want to exit in 4 or 5 years' time, but hopefully by that stage the business has grown, it's a lot more stable. A new group of shareholders may be willing to come in, or your client could buy back those shares if they wanted to. It opens up a whole host of opportunities. I think we need to think about all of this when we look at the changing work environment, because your role, I think, is to proactively deliver financial, commercial, and management accounting advice to your SME clients, to assist them to achieve their dreams of running small businesses in Australia. And I'm certain that if you went back to some of the people who have been running businesses for a few years, their dreams were not that they would not make a profit like 46% of the people currently operating are not making a profit, according to the ATO figures supplied to the Ombudsman. And they would like to be earning a lot more than the total weekly full-time wage. Whereas the Ombudsman is reporting that 3/4 of the self-employed people are not earning that. There's a fundamental problem in SME businesses in Australia, which we need to address and help sort out. And I believe accounting firms are also going to benefit by that because of the opportunities that you will have to supply interesting services. So let's look at some of the advisory services package developed by ESS BIZTOOLS for accountants. And they've been developed by accountants. I've developed this range of material based on my knowledge of the problems of SMEs, from being a senior partner in an accounting firm servicing SMEs. But I also had the opportunity to work as the Chief Financial Officer and Company Secretary of a listed public company. And I observed and had a significant role in introducing systems into that company that enabled better management. And the whole process was built around weekly performance reports, an analysis of, did we achieve our targets this week? And if not, what went wrong? And then fixing it. That was the emphasis from the CEO right down to our most basic employee. We had to find the problem if a problem had occurred. Does that happen in your SME clients? Do they analyse their performance each week? Do you assist them? Because I found that unless there was an accounting involvement, that process didn't happen. Area managers and line managers might say, yeah, we'll do it, but they get caught up in all sorts of other management responsibilities. Whereas the accounting team in the organisation I was with were fundamentally employed to ensure that this process worked properly. That each week for every operation, we had hundreds of them, we had a result so that it could be analysed. Who didn't achieve expectations? And if they didn't, why? Was it human error? Was it fraud? Unfortunately, it was in a couple of cases. Was it because certain products hadn't turned up in time that were featured in specials, so we didn't have the special product? Or was there a mathematical error? Or was someone lazy and didn't do the stock takes properly? As long as the reasons were identified, we were reasonably happy. I don't know about the CEO sometimes. I think he might have been a wee bit cranky that the errors occurred in the first place. My role was to make sure that the accounting team discovered what those problems were. And it was then up to the management team to implement the corrections to them. Accountants weren't going to do that. And this is the great opportunity we have with today's technology and today's communication to be able to deliver these types of services. Because unless accountants roll up our sleeves to undertake this work, when you look at the dismal analysis of where accountants are heading, delivered by Chris Jordan in the tax return preparation market, not the advice area, I agree, and I want to emphasise that. I don't know what future accountants have got. I think we need to start facing up to that. Think back over 100 years of the jobs that have disappeared or the components of the workforce involved in doing certain activities. Mankind's always been in transition. And now accountants are caught up in the middle of it. But we have a huge SME market where unfortunately half of them aren't doing very well. But that still means that a million are doing fairly well and some are doing outstandingly well. And those ones, I think, have been assisted by accountants offering great follow-on services. So that's our challenge that I want to present to you today to think about. So in our system, we're saying that, well, where do you start is analysing their business. I found when I went into a public company that the knowledge that I'd gleaned as a younger accountant in a chartered accountancy firm working on SME clients, I didn't know much about any of the businesses. But very quickly, in a public company environment, I knew a lot about how that business operated. I had to, because that was part of my responsibilities, to implement internal control systems and reporting systems, to make sure that foremen in our meatworks understood the reports that were being prepared for them. We had to change some of the language to make it easier for them. In fact, I went to our major meatworks and met with the foreman and got them to tell me what they wanted to call the various items on the report and what items they specifically wanted to see. Now, some of them were still the same. They just changed the names. They understood what they meant. They didn't want it in accounting jargon. So please be aware of that. You need to get the team who's going to be the recipients of the reports, or who have to be reporting on what the problems were to their general manager in that business or the CEO. Let them have their say on what things are going to be called and described as. So the business system is the review of what goes on, analysing for internal control, very important. The business planning introduction, every business needs a business plan. Now, in our starter package, we give an overview of the business planning requirements. In our subsequent packages, we've got more emphasis on business planning. But business plans are very important for business people. They're just as important as maps are for tourists. And then it flows in to prepare the budgets and cash flow forecasts. And we give some advice on doing that. Please don't go off and prepare a business plan with one group of people doing it and someone else quite separately prepares a budget and a cash flow forecast. The budget and cash flow forecast has to be the financial interpretation of the business plan, and that's very important. And in that whole process, we need to make sure that our clients understand terms of trade with suppliers, that they contact suppliers before they start business or before they switch suppliers, to make sure that they understand what the prices are going to be. And very importantly, they understand what the payment terms required by the supplier. Because some people get a very rude shock when they start a business or they're running a business and they decide to change suppliers and they go in and place their first order and they get asked to lodge a sum of money. It might be $20,000, $30,000 or a lot more, because the supplier doesn't know them. And the suppliers are well aware of the business failure rate, how it's going. So they ask for cash on order, and that can completely blow out the cash flow forecast that may have been done for that business. And there's other things involved also. They need to understand debtors. They need a debtor system. And our system gives you the debtor system. You implement it for the client and monitor it so that they understand the necessity to have a communication with a new customer, that they get them to fill in a credit application form, that they check the credit application form and make some phone calls. They don't want to end up with someone else's problem. If this particular business has got a reputation for not paying its bills on time, well, does your client want them? And they need to understand the calculation of the debtors' days outstanding and why it is so important to monitor it. And then we turn to another big problem, and that's payments to the tax office. They come round very regularly, don't they? And businesses need to have built that into their thinking and in their cash flow forecasts. But if they're having to pay their suppliers with the order that they hadn't anticipated doing, they thought they'd get at least 30 days credit. And if they have assumed that every one of their credit customers is going to pay them promptly on a 30-day basis, unfortunately, I think they're in for a big shock. And that will completely blow out their cash flow forecasts. And then we got the tax man looking for the tax payments. Deduction from employees' wages for tax, superannuation, and GST amounts owed. And the tax officer are nowhere near as lenient as what they were through the COVID crisis. So your client can be in trouble. And then we move into the big item, I think, the 52-week business enhancement system. You know, when we're running an accountancy firm, basically preparing annual sets of accounts and tax returns, I don't think we're giving much thought to what's going on in our clients' businesses week by week, month by month. But I think we should. I think that's the real challenge, to offer those services, just as you would if you were employed as the full-time accountant in that business. Those full-time accountants working for large or small businesses and even into bigger businesses don't sit there all day just preparing monthly accounts. They do a lot of other things built around the weekly performance report so that management's got information of how they traded, key performance indicators, business metrics analysis, analysing the cash flow forecast, trying to identify when there might be a problem in the cash flow requirements for the business, and then starting to think ahead. What needs to be done for that? Has the business got the ability to borrow money? Does it want to borrow any more money? Is there an opportunity to raise capital? I honestly believe you need to be able to communicate this to your client so that you've got a detailed knowledge of how crowdsourced funding, early stage innovation companies, Section 708, and venture capital raising works, so that you can roll this out as a proposal to your client and work with them. So the 52-week business enhancement system is very important. It starts with daily matters, a daily report. What happened yesterday? What went wrong? What have we got to fix? The weekly performance report, and then the monthly financial accounts with a reconciliation back to the original budget. Highlight the problems, but very importantly, confirm to the CEO that the monthly financial accounts have proven the weekly forecasts. When I was the chief financial officer of a public company, my boss used to say to me every month, just as we're about to walk into our public company board meeting, we had a number of external directors on our board, some very capable people there, and he'd say to me, have you reconciled the weeklies with the monthlies? I said, yes. And how did it come out? I said, we're right, no problem. That was very important to him because he knew the directors knew that he run the business on the weeklies, but we needed to make sure the weeklies were accurate because there was a certain amount of estimates. You might even call them guesstimates in those figures because not everything was known, but we needed to be able to make informed estimates. Fiscal management is very important, and I've touched on some of this already. And we have a program which is looking at inventory treatment, debtors treatment, suppliers, work in progress, capital expenditure. Characteristics of a well-run business is the most admired paper that I've written that's included within ESS BIZTOOLS. People ring me up and compliment me. It's years since I first wrote it. I've updated it quite regularly. But what we've tried to outline is what are the characteristics. And a lot of them are centered around systems relating to team training and communication, the rhythm of meetings, daily, weekly, monthly, in various groups within the business, the receipt of information, the weekly performance report on all activities, so that an immediate investigation can be undertaken to find out what went wrong. Another very important area is the determination of charge-out rates. And I'm mentioning here tradies' charge-out rates. But we've also got professional service firms' charge-out rates. How do they determine them? Is there any science to it, or is it just plucking a figure? Is it increasing from last year 3%, but was last year's right? And is it built around trying to achieve a profit for the business? So we have that calculation in the system as well. And then we have the research and development introduction, because this is another area. Whilst there's thousands of SMEs around Australia that undertake research and development each year, not all of them are successful in their claims to claim it, because some of them have done it as an individual or as a partnership where you've got to be a company. And some of them haven't spent the minimum expenditure of $20,000 in the year, and they claim that they didn't know that. So we need to be able to communicate. So within our basic starter package, we have an introduction to research and development. So you'll be able to just answer questions from a client immediately. There's a flow chart which you can send to your client, which helps explain how this process works. It doesn't mean that you are committing yourself to be the long-term advisor on research and development if you're not happy on that. But I really would challenge you to at least give it a go, to attend our training programs so that you understand how the full system operates. Because now and again, an accountant will say to me, Peter, I can't help them on research and development. I'm not an engineer or a scientist. I said, why? He said, well, I'm not going to do the research activities. And I say, you've got it all wrong. You've got nothing to do with the research activities. That's your client's worry, or the expert they engage. I think your role, if we want to put it into a stereotype as to what your role represents, I think you're the internal auditor. Because in ESS BizTools, we've got a full array of forms, and those forms need to be completed because they comply with Oz Industries and the tax officer's requirements. I've gone through and analysed that legislation and built it so it's easy for you to advise your client what's got to get done daily, weekly, monthly, and there's a lot of that. The records need to be kept, but they're not your role to do them. Act as the internal auditor, check the lists off. It can be very valuable service that you're supplying to your clients and helping them grow. So please think about it. So in our starter package, you get the system to help you on the R&D introduction. And you can answer questions, which might be a client sitting in front of you saying, I've heard one of my competitors got an R&D grant. How do I get that? Well, that's the opening, isn't it? Well, you say to them, first of all, you're currently in a partnership, so you're got to be in a company. What's your research and development activities? You've got to spend more than $20,000 on legitimate R&D, but you need to identify that someone hasn't already registered that idea somewhere in the world. So there's a whole process to go through. But it can be very worthwhile for some of your clients. Wouldn't it be great to be able to give them that advice, to answer those questions there and then? And you will develop a reputation in the marketplace that you're able to give that advice. And you might be surprised at the new clients you receive. Survival in difficult times. I must admit, I first wrote this package probably 20 years ago, and we've updated it fairly regularly ever since. Because in Australia, unfortunately, every year there are floods, cyclones, earthquakes, bushfires, and other disasters that people need assistance in recovering from. And then there's the unfortunate circumstances that assist where a major business closes down. You know, we have the car industry, the motor vehicle manufacturing industry closed down in Australia 20 years ago, caused a lot of problems to a lot of SMEs. And these type of unfortunate events continue to occur. So how can you help your clients who are in difficult situations? Help them to survive by giving them information. This is my overview of the introductory package within ESS BizTools to assist you to become involved in the delivery of advisory services. Advisory services that are concentrating on financial, commercial, and management accounting issues to assist your clients. You'll still have the tax return to be prepared for these business clients, but hopefully you will have developed a role in dealing with your clients where you are seen to be the virtual chief financial officer. Doesn't mean you've got to be there every day. In fact, you might rarely be there, but you've implemented the systems, you're using the communications and the technology to be able to give this ongoing advice to your clients. I look forward to you making further inquiries with us, visiting our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, or giving me a phone call if you've got questions, 0418 190 181. And we can have a 40-minute complimentary Zoom discussion where I can work through and explain to you what I think the processes should be for your firm. And I think if you undertake this process, you will find that you have a very contented team. You will have some challenges because as you come across new issues with clients, knowledge will have to be obtained. We're trying to keep up to date with all these developments at ESS BizTools. We continually write new material. We write a newsletter each month, Business Plus, which hopefully you've received a complimentary copy of 2 editions of that Business Plus over recent time. If you haven't, please send us an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I'll make sure you receive it. I look forward to hearing from you. Please seriously consider how you are going to be proactively involved in servicing the requirements of your SME clients from now on. Have a great day. Goodbye.